She blocked his way and snapped, "First class is not for people like you." He said nothing, just smiled, stepped back, and let her finish digging her own grave. But what she didn't know was that the man she just humiliated was one of the most powerful people on the flight, and by the time the plane landed, the entire world would know it. What happens when hate speaks louder than reason, and kindness answers with silence? The terminal buzzed with the usual tension of a busy afternoon at JFK Airport. First-class passengers were already lining up, adjusting their designer luggage and sipping overpriced coffee. Among them stood Margaret Collins, a woman in her early 60s, wrapped in pearls and privilege. With a perfect blonde bob, an immaculately pressed blazer, and an air of superiority, she scanned the crowd like a self-appointed guardian of class distinction. Her eyes narrowed when she noticed a tall, athletic black man walking toward the first-class boarding lane in a simple hoodie and joggers, wheeling a duffel bag behind him. Her lips tightened. He didn't look like someone who belonged there, at least, not in her eyes. Michael B. Jordan, wearing sunglasses and a relaxed smile, nodded politely to the gate agent and handed over his phone with his boarding pass. Before the agent could scan it, Margaret stepped forward and placed a firm hand on the counter, practically pushing Michael's out of the way. "Excuse me," she said loudly, drawing attention. "This is first class." The agent, momentarily confused, looked between the two. Michael raised an eyebrow, still calm. "Yes, he said, his voice even. "That's what my ticket says too." Margaret gave a scoff that was half laugh, half growl. "I don't think so. There's no way you're in first class. Maybe economy, or standby. You should wait your turn like everyone else." Passengers nearby began to shift awkwardly, some pretending not to listen, others openly staring. A young woman in the economy line pulled out her phone, discreetly recording the confrontation. The gate agent, visibly uneasy, tried to intervene. Please, let me handle this." But Margaret was on a mission. "No," she barked. "This man is clearly mistaken. Or worse, he's trying to sneak in." Michael took a step back, not wanting to escalate things. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'll wait." The agent stared at him, beginning to recognize who he was, but Michael gave a small shake of his head. "Not yet." Margaret huffed in satisfaction, unaware she had just tried to bar a global superstar from boarding his own flight. "People these days," she muttered, loud enough for all to hear. "No shame. Think they can just walk into first class without earning it." She turned her back on him as if to end the matter, her shoulders squared like she'd defended civilization itself. Michael, still calm, checked the boarding time on his phone. The agent silently waved him forward, but he declined again, standing off to the side, letting the line progress. As other passengers boarded, several whispered to each other, nudging their companions and pointing in Michael's direction. A few seemed to recognize him, their eyes going wide. But Michael, ever composed, leaned against a pillar and waited, unfazed. Meanwhile, the teen who had filmed the whole interaction uploaded the clip with the caption, "Racist lady at JFK tries to stop black man from boarding first class. Wait till you see who he is." Within minutes, the video began gaining traction online. Likes, shares, and outraged comments multiplied with each passing second. By the time the final boarding call echoed through the terminal, the gate agent approached Michael personally, apologizing in hushed tones. "Mr. Jordan, please," she said. "You're welcome to board now." Margaret, already seated in her luxury leather pod on the plane, looked up when she saw him walk past. Her expression twisted in confusion. "You again?" she snapped. "What, did you bribe your way in?" Michael gave her a small, mysterious smile and simply said, "Something like that." He slid into his seat just 2 rows behind her, pulled out a book, and settled in. The door to the plane closed. The flight was about to take off, but so was something else, something far bigger than she could ever imagine. The plane hummed with the low murmur of passengers settling in, flight attendants checking compartments, and the occasional mechanical ping over the intercom. Margaret sat with a forced elegance, fluffing her scarf and sipping her champagne like the queen of a castle in the clouds. She hadn't yet connected the dots, hadn't realized the man she insulted was more than just another passenger. Meanwhile, Michael B. Jordan sat quietly, head tilted against the window, earbuds in, blocking out the noise. But inside his mind, the memory of his mother's words played louder than any podcast or playlist. You don't have to fight every battle. Some people destroy themselves with their own words. Just stand tall. And that's exactly what he was doing. Growing up in Newark, Michael had seen and heard it all. As a boy with big dreams in a rough neighborhood, he had to learn early how to stay calm under pressure. His mom had worked double shifts as a caterer, his dad doing odd jobs after getting laid off from the auto plant. Michael's dreams of acting were met with skepticism at school and outright disbelief in the community. But his parents never let him give up. When he got his first role, he brought his check home like it was gold. His mom cried and framed the pay stub. That was the same grace he carried with him now, not flashy, not loud, but deeply rooted in pride and endurance. Back in the cabin, Margaret signaled a flight attendant with a wave of her fingers, whispering something while nodding toward Michael's row. The attendant gave a tight smile and replied, "Yes, he's a first-class passenger." Margaret's frown deepened, but she said no more. A man seated across the aisle leaned toward Michael. "Hey," he said quietly, "just wanted to say I saw what happened back there. You handled it like a champ." Michael nodded. "Appreciate it." The man looked like he wanted to say more but turned back to his magazine. The buzz from the airport had started leaking onto the plane through Wi-Fi. Whispers passed like ripples on water. Passengers started pulling out their phones, tapping screens, nudging each other with raised eyebrows. A few discreetly pointed at Michael. But he didn't acknowledge it. He stayed in his bubble, wrapped in silence and self-control. From her seat, Margaret caught wind of the murmurs. She leaned toward a man next to her, asking what was going on. He pulled up the trending video. Her eyes narrowed as she watched herself on screen, barking at Michael at the gate, accusing him, degrading him. The video was clear, the sound sharper than she remembered. Every word she'd said played back like a slap. Her heart dropped. The man in the hoodie wasn't just any passenger. He was someone. Someone important. She minimized the video and opened a browser. A few keystrokes later, she froze. There it was, Michael B. Jordan. Actor. Director. Philanthropist. Time's most influential. Her hands shook as she closed her tablet and looked toward his seat, just a few rows back. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Michael still hadn't moved. He wasn't basking in the attention. He wasn't posting or bragging or giving speeches. He had no need. His silence was the speech. His presence was the lesson. Across the plane, a mother nudged her young son and pointed at him. "That's the man from the movie," she whispered. The boy smiled and waved. Michael returned the gesture with a quick nod and a soft grin. It was a small moment, but meaningful, an unspoken reminder that how you carry yourself when others tear you down speaks louder than any comeback. The pilot's voice came over the speaker, welcoming everyone aboard, mentioning clear skies, and a smooth flight to Los Angeles. But for Margaret, there was a storm brewing inside her. Her cheeks burned. She clutched her champagne glass like it could anchor her dignity. But there was no dignity in what she'd done, and now she knew it. And worse, others knew too. The very people she wanted to impress were scrolling through comments, laughing, gasping, judging. Her power, her confidence, her sense of superiority, all slipping away with each passing minute. Michael finally adjusted in his seat, reaching for the script tucked into his carry-on. He flipped it open, highlighter in hand, already moving past the drama. To him, this wasn't new. He had faced bigger trials, heavier criticism, deeper wounds. But each time, he chose grace. Not for them, but for himself. He wasn't going to let anyone drag him into their darkness. Not today. Not ever. At 35,000 feet, the flight drifted through smooth skies, but down on the ground, turbulence was building at lightning speed. The video from the gate, now clipped and captioned in bold letters, was circulating like wildfire across social media platforms. In under an hour, it had been shared by multiple celebrity accounts, retweeted by civil rights advocates, and dissected by trending news aggregators. The thumbnail alone, a still of Margaret mid-sentence, pointing accusingly, became the internet's newest symbol of privilege gone unchecked. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them, ranging from outrage to disbelief. Hashtags like #MichaelStaysClassy, #GateKaren, and #GraceInFirst were dominating feeds worldwide. Inside the aircraft, the Wi-Fi signal allowed only the faintest sense of what was happening below, but it was enough. A few passengers whispered in clusters near the bathrooms, sharing what they had seen online. A man in business class pulled up the video on his tablet and let his seatmate watch. A couple near the front took a selfie with Michael's row blurred in the background, their caption already pre-written in their minds. The ripple effect of Margaret's outburst was now a wave gaining power with every share, every view, every comment. And yet, she remained mostly oblivious, scrolling slowly through old emails and avoiding eye contact with everyone around her. The woman seated beside her, a school principal traveling to a conference, finally broke the silence. She gently tapped Margaret's arm. "You might want to check your phone again," she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. Margaret looked up, confused, and did as instructed. Her inbox had exploded. Texts from friends, missed calls from numbers she recognized and some she didn't, all flooding in with one clear message: "You're on the internet." She clicked one of the links and watched the familiar footage once more, now accompanied by a roaring online soundtrack of judgment. Her face twisted in horror. Not because she had been misunderstood, but because the world had seen the version of her she tried to keep hidden. Michael, still seated calmly, had become aware of the situation too. A flight attendant had quietly passed him a note. "Sir, you're trending online. Do you want us to inform the captain or take any measures?" He shook his head with a light smile, folded the note, and tucked it into his pocket. He wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time his presence alone triggered a reaction. It wouldn't be the last. But what stunned him now wasn't the incident itself, it was the overwhelming response. He knew the internet could be a megaphone for injustice, but even he didn't expect the world to rally behind something so fast, so fiercely. The plane continued cruising above the clouds, but inside, the atmosphere was shifting. Some passengers now looked at Margaret with open disgust. Others avoided her completely. The attendants, once eager to respond to her every beck and call, kept their distance, maintaining only the most basic politeness. Margaret, who once took pride in commanding attention, now found herself shrinking into her seat, trying to disappear. Every time she glanced around, someone else seemed to be staring, or worse, filming. The role she'd assigned herself as the righteous protector of first class had turned into something else entirely. A public villain in a viral drama. A group of young passengers in the back, all college students returning from a study trip, began whispering about organizing a public apology once they landed. One of them, majoring in media ethics, was already drafting a blog post titled "When Silence is Power, What Michael Taught Us at 35,000 Feet." Another discussed the potential impact of the moment on conversations about race, status, and behavior in public spaces. This wasn't just a video anymore. It was a moment, a movement, a reflection of a larger problem wrapped in one interaction captured in real time. Somewhere around the halfway point of the flight, the captain announced light turbulence ahead, and passengers were asked to remain seated. As the plane dipped slightly and a few gasps filled the cabin, Margaret clutched her seat arms, heart racing. Her world was unraveling in more ways than one. She looked over her shoulder at Michael, who sat calmly, his breathing steady, eyes closed. He didn't gloat. He didn't react. He simply waited. For what, she couldn't tell, but that made it worse. Because Margaret had never met a man who didn't need revenge to feel powerful. And that terrified her. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting a soft golden glow through the cabin windows as the flight entered its final leg. A calm voice from the cockpit announced the expected descent into Los Angeles in under an hour. Passengers shifted, stretched, and resumed quiet conversations. Yet despite the calm, tension lingered like fog in the air, especially in the front rows. Margaret sat with stiff posture, hands clasped in her lap, eyes darting nervously from her phone to the aisle. The silence around her wasn't peaceful, it was punishment. Every interaction felt cold, measured, restrained. The respect she once took for granted had vanished. Her mind replayed the video again and again. Each second chipped away at her self-image until all that remained was shame. As if summoned by the mood, the plane suddenly jolted, dipping to one side. A loud ding echoed overhead. Passengers gasped and braced themselves. The overhead lights flickered. A voice crackled over the intercom, calm but firm, advising everyone to fasten seatbelts immediately due to unexpected turbulence. The aircraft shook again, this time more violently. A drink cart wobbled and nearly tipped before a flight attendant grabbed it just in time. Screams rippled through the cabin. For the first time since the plane left the ground, fear replaced pride on Margaret's face. As the plane dipped again, Margaret's hand flew to her chest. Her breathing became shallow. Her fingers twitched uncontrollably. Her lips moved, but no words came out. A flight attendant rushed over, trying to assess her. "Are you okay? Do you have a condition we should know about?" Margaret couldn't answer. Her face had gone pale, her body slumped in the seat. It was clear she was in medical distress. Panic swirled around her seat. The crew called out for medical help. "Is there a doctor or nurse on board?" No one responded immediately. A man across the aisle hesitated, then stood halfway, only to admit, "I'm a dentist, not trained for this." From a few rows back, Michael looked up. He had removed his earbuds when the turbulence began. When he saw the flurry of motion and the attendant's worried face, he quietly rose to his feet and walked forward. "I'm certified in CPR and emergency response," he said calmly. "Let me help." The attendant nodded, moving aside. Michael knelt beside Margaret and checked her pulse. It was faint, erratic. Her breathing had become uneven. He tilted her seat back, lifted her chin, and began the protocol. His movements were quick but careful, professional but gentle. The woman who had humiliated him now relied on his hands to survive. Several passengers watched in awe. A few teared up. A man whispered, "He's saving her. After everything." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same woman who claimed he didn't belong had now placed her life in his. Margaret slowly came to, coughing slightly. Her eyes fluttered open and landed on the face above hers. For a moment, she looked confused. Then horror replaced confusion. It was him. The man from the gate. The man she had publicly embarrassed. Her voice cracked. "You." Michael nodded, not unkindly. "You're okay. Just breathe." She wanted to say something else but couldn't. Her voice failed her. Her pride failed her. She simply closed her eyes and let the moment hold her. The turbulence passed. The plane steadied. Applause broke out, not wild or loud, but respectful, quiet, filled with meaning. Michael stood and returned to his seat, saying nothing. A flight attendant came by minutes later with water, whispering a soft thank you that echoed louder than any announcement. The rest of the flight passed in near silence. People were no longer focused on the scandal or the trending video. They were thinking about what they'd just witnessed. Grace in action. Forgiveness without words. Power used not to punish, but to protect. Margaret sat wrapped in a blanket now, her confidence stripped bare. Her body felt heavy. But it wasn't the altitude, it was the weight of truth. She had made assumptions. She had acted with cruelty. And the very man she tried to reduce had risen above her with compassion. That moment stayed with her, not just because it saved her life, but because it shattered her illusion of superiority. She realized she wasn't in control. She never had been. Not at the gate. Not in the air. And certainly not in the presence of someone who understood that real strength doesn't need to shout. The wheels touched down with a soft bump, the cabin gently shaking as the plane coasted down the runway at LAX. The voice of the captain welcomed everyone to Los Angeles, and as always, there was polite applause, followed by the usual scramble of passengers reaching for their overhead bags. But this time, the energy was different. There was no idle chatter, no impatient sighs. People moved slower, more aware, more thoughtful. The event's mid-flight had shifted something in the air. Margaret remained in her seat, still visibly shaken, her body heavy with the weight of realization. Her scarf was now draped loosely around her neck, her hair slightly out of place. Her eyes kept drifting back to the man who had saved her, unable to form the words that needed to be said. The flight crew made the final safety announcements, but even they glanced occasionally at Michael's row, now fully understanding who he was. A young steward who had remained quiet throughout the ordeal approached him. "Sir," he said softly, "just a heads up, there's a crowd at the gate. Press, maybe fans. Should I arrange a private exit?" Michael gave him a small, warm smile. "It's fine. I'll go with everyone else." His voice, like everything he did, was measured, calm, confident without needing to be loud. As the door opened and passengers began to disembark, Michael stood, grabbed his bag, and stepped into the aisle. His figure was relaxed, unbothered. But Margaret's eyes followed him like a shadow. Then came the moment that shifted everything. When he stepped through the doorway and into the terminal, there was a flash, then another. Reporters, photographers, and waiting fans surged forward, calling his name. "Michael! Over here! Mr. Jordan! You handled that so well, can we get a comment?" A few flight attendants gasped. Others blinked in disbelief. Even some passengers who had doubted what they saw online now understood. It was real. He was him. Margaret watched through the open cabin door. Her breath caught. She was seeing the full picture now, not just the man she thought didn't belong, but the global icon who had every right to be exactly where he was. And more than that, he had shown a level of grace she didn't believe existed in people she had judged unfairly all her life. The airline supervisor, now informed of the situation, rushed over and addressed him respectfully, even offering to take him through a side entrance. But Michael declined again, pausing only to greet a fan with a quick handshake and a thank you. He moved through the chaos like someone used to the spotlight, but not dependent on it. Margaret remained in her seat, torn between slipping out quietly and confronting what she had done. But she knew hiding would only make it worse. So she gathered her courage, stood, and walked out of the cabin. The terminal was now buzzing with activity. Dozens of people had their phones out, capturing the moment. Security began guiding people to the side, clearing a path. Margaret spotted Michael near the exit, surrounded by a few members of his team who had come to meet him. Their presence only confirmed his importance. Men in suits, carrying equipment, checking schedules, coordinating transport. She hesitated, then slowly approached him. The crowd saw her and recognized her face from the video. A murmur spread. Some people raised their eyebrows. Others frowned. One woman whispered, "That's the lady." Margaret cleared her throat. Michael turned to her with the same calm expression he'd worn throughout the flight. No bitterness, no smirk, no sarcasm. Just presence. She struggled to speak. I didn't know. I'm so sorry, she managed, her voice low. That wasn't me. I mean, it was, but it shouldn't have been. Michael nodded once. But it was, he said simply. There was no anger in his tone, only truth. She reached out slightly, as if to shake his hand or offer something tangible to make it right. I'd like to, maybe meet for coffee. Or dinner. Talk properly, she asked, hoping to find a way to rewrite the ending. But Michael shook his head gently. I think you've already seen everything you needed to see, he said. This was never about me. It's about what we carry with us, and what we choose to let go of. The words weren't rehearsed. They were real, honest. And they left Margaret standing still as he turned and walked away. A reporter tried to follow up with Margaret, shoving a microphone in her face. Do you regret what you said? Someone called out. She looked into the camera, unsure what to say. What words could fix what had already gone viral across the world? What apology would mean anything when the damage was public, permanent, and undeniable? She gave no comment and walked away, this time not as the woman who owned the cabin with her presence, but as someone who had been stripped of illusion. The days that followed were a storm. The video continued to spread, reaching millions in just 24 hours. Talk shows dissected it frame by frame. News anchors debated the moment with panels of experts, sociologists, and celebrities. Late-night hosts made jokes, while podcasts dug deeper into the social commentary behind it all. Margaret's face was everywhere, frozen in that moment of entitled outrage, now synonymous with what many called first-class racism. The #MargaretMoment trended for 3 days straight, not just in the US, but globally. Her inbox overflowed with messages, some hateful, others sympathetic, most just shocked. Her job, a prestigious position on the board of a luxury lifestyle company, came under scrutiny. People called for accountability. Sponsors distanced themselves. Her name was no longer associated with class. It was tied to shame. Margaret stayed inside for days. The curtains stayed drawn. The phone went unanswered. She had never experienced anything like this level of public backlash. Every mirror she passed reflected back a woman she barely recognized. The strong, composed socialite was gone. In her place stood someone who had been humbled beyond words. She replayed the flight over and over in her mind, the moment she blocked Michael, the words she'd used, the smugness in her tone, and worst of all, the assumption she had made simply based on how he looked. She cringed every time. She wished she could erase it, hide from it, reverse time. But she couldn't. The world had seen her for who she was in that moment, and so had she. Meanwhile, Michael B. Jordan remained mostly silent on the matter. He didn't issue a formal statement. He didn't tweet about it. Instead, he went back to work, showing up on set for his next project as if nothing had happened. But people noticed something different. In interviews, when asked indirectly about the incident, he answered with calm wisdom. "Sometimes the loudest statement is choosing not to respond," he said on one segment. "And sometimes grace speaks louder than any microphone ever could." The clip was shared across platforms, hailed as one of the classiest responses ever given in the face of public insult. Despite the backlash, Margaret eventually agreed to a live interview with a major network. The studio was cold, the lights bright. The host was respectful, but firm. "Why did you do it?" he asked directly. Margaret's hands trembled in her lap. She took a long breath before answering. "I thought I was protecting a standard," she said. "But I realize now, I was protecting my ignorance. I looked at him and didn't see a man. I saw a threat. And that's my failure." Her voice cracked. "He saved my life, and I almost tried to erase his existence before that." The clip from her interview went viral too, but this time, some people saw a woman trying to change. Whether she deserved forgiveness was up to the world, and not everyone gave it. Michael never responded to the apology publicly. He didn't need to. His silence had always been the message. But privately, he sent the studio a note. Not to Margaret, but to the host. It read, "Thank you for letting the moment breathe. Not every story needs a hero and a villain. Sometimes, it just needs truth." The host read it live on air and said nothing else afterward. The audience sat in quiet reflection. And that silence said more than applause ever could. Margaret never returned to her board position. She resigned quietly, moved out of the spotlight, and began volunteering at a community center a few towns over. It wasn't a redemption story, not yet. But it was a beginning. She knew now that change wasn't something you posted about, it was something you lived, one decision at a time. And if anyone recognized her, she never denied it. She simply said, "Yes, that was me. I'm still learning." The final twist to the story came months later, when Michael was honored at an awards ceremony for his humanitarian work. As he stepped up to accept the recognition, he didn't mention the flight or Margaret. Instead, he told a story about his mother. How she taught him that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it means freeing yourself from the prison of anger. He ended with a quote she often repeated, "People may fail you, but don't let them make you forget who you are." The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Not for the films. Not even for the fame. But for what he stood for when it mattered most. The moment at the airport gate had been short, but its echo lasted far beyond the flight. It became a reminder for millions. About assumptions. About silence. About grace. And about what it truly means to rise above. Some called it a scandal. Others called it a lesson. But one thing was clear, it left no one the same. And in a world that so often rewards noise, Michael B. Jordan proved that sometimes, the quietest man in the room carries the most power of all.